It's great to have a community to be able to come and practice with people in person, and that's sort of the ideal. But like you don't always have that depending on the situations of where the world is and whatever's going on in life and in, if you have to travel or whatever's going on. And so this is, I guess, a perfect example of that we should all have a way to learn how to practice our yoga in our homes with ourselves, so that we know sort of a sense of what movements are going to help us to kind of maintain our bodies and to maintain our minds. So it's a good exercise in that regard. Obviously, it's not ideal, but it's sort of another skill that we need to learn and develop in our practice.
Well, I can take a Shavasana during the whole time if that's okay with you.
Yeah, modifications are always welcome. You do what fits your practice and your body. And so is this everybody signed in? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. We will begin our practice with our breathing. Notice why we're here, what it is that we are practicing for, kind of setting our intention. Taking inventory of our mind and all the things that are floating around in there, this chaotic world, just letting them go. Noticing the breathing and how the breath affects your body. Always looking for the subtle lines of energy that flow from our breathing to our muscles. The rising and falling of the abdomen, chest and shoulders. Noticing if there's any knots or tensions that we're carried with us throughout our days, that we can identify and notice what it is that we need to work through with our practice today. And coming back to our intention of why we practice. Personally, I practice yoga as this sense of developing a skill for some kind of a sense of costless happiness. A happiness that doesn't take anything from the world, that you can always generate with yourself wherever you are, no matter what's going on in the world. You have like a 3 by 5 foot space to set down a yoga mat. You can practice these poses and find the joy in simple joy in just moving the body and moving the mind and body together, and having gratitude for that ability to move, to find a form, and to practice poses. It's such a simple, subtle happiness that we can derive from this. And from that sparks a great passion for this practice of yoga. So we'll begin with gratitude for that practice. I always like to start with an Om, so if you'd like to sing along, take a deep inhalation with me. You can begin to open your eyes. We'll place our hands on the mat in front of us, finding our way into our tabletop position, starting with a few cat and cows as we begin to awaken the spine, moving from the tailbone, each one vertebrae at a time, like a wave, into our bow, to our cat. Then exhaling as we lift the tailbone, lift the mid-back, lift the neck and the top of the head. Following through with our own breathing, the rhythm that suits you. Just beginning to lengthen, create space in the back of the spine. And then creating space in that front body as we open the heart into our cow. Meeting knee in a neutral spine. We'll begin to awaken our limbs. You can bring the right arm overhead, keeping that shoulder blade onto the back. Bring that right arm all the way out to the right. You Feeling lifted up for a counter stretch. Feeling a twist as you try to stack the shoulders and keep the hips square. And exhaling that hand down to the mat. Inhaling the left hand up overhead, lengthening through the left side body, hollowing out that left armpit. Keeping the shoulder blade onto the back as we bring the left hand out to the left. Noticing the core engaged as you stack the shoulders, keeping the hips square, reaching that left hand straight up to the ceiling. And exhaling that hand back to center, finding our grip, wrists beneath our shoulders. And we'll lift that right foot out behind us, pushing out through the heel, lifting it about as high as the hips. Trying to create length between the hip and the heel. Flexing that foot, pointing your toes towards your hands. We'll bring that right foot all the way out to the right. Trying to find an airplane leg. See if you can keep that foot lifted as high as the hip. Starting to feel a little warmth in that leg. We'll bring that right leg back out behind us. Let's set it down and warm up our left leg, pushing out through that heel, reaching that foot, finding length through that left side body. Using our hands for our stability, as much weight on our hands as we have on our right foot, as we push out through that left heel and bring that left foot all the way out to the left, trying to keep it at least as high as the hips. Breathing into that left leg. And when you feel that warmth there, we'll bring that left leg back out behind us, squaring those hips, bringing our knees together, and exhaling our hips between the heels into a child's pose. Wiggling our fingers as far above us as they'll go, lengthening both side bodies. Walking our fingers all the way over to the left. Hollowing out that right armpit. Crossing that right hand over the left hand. Feeling the crescent in the side body all the way down to the hip. We'll walk our hands back to center and then lengthen the other side, the left side body, reaching to the right. Crossing that left hand over the right hand, taking a deep breath into that left kidney. Feeling yourself grow long. And exhaling back to center, coming back into our tabletop. We'll find our way onto our knees, a kneeling position. And we'll warm up our shoulders. Our hands can come to our shoulders. We'll pull them down towards the hips and further onto the back. Plugging them in, keeping the back muscles strong, keeping the core strong, pulling the ribs into our core so we get a flat back and a strong back. Our arms can come out and keeping those shoulder muscles engaged, pulling towards one another. Broadening our collarbones. We can cross the left hand underneath the right. And we'll find eagle arms as we bring our left hand to the right, lifting the elbows as high as the shoulders, squeezing the hands together, and lifting through the top of the head. Exhaling as we release, coming back. Our arms long. We'll cross the right arm underneath this time, keeping those shoulder blades pulling towards the hips onto the back, keeping the core and the back muscles strong as we lift through the top of the head. Lift those elbows just as high as the shoulders and squeeze the hands together with as much pressure as we'd like to open those shoulders. Exhaling our hands to our heart as we unwind. Bringing our hands down to the mat, tucking our toes, and we'll find our first Ardha Mukha Shavasana, the downward facing dog. Paddling out our feet, finding a pose that feels comfortable, where the heels can reach for the mat behind you, placing your weight behind the knuckles and fingertips as you squeeze those hands together, keeping that upper back muscle strong with your shoulders, pulling those hands towards the feet, and lifting your tailbone to create a small curve in the back. Taking a few deep breaths here as we find our resting pose. And then we'll step our feet inch by inch, baby steps, walking forwards to the top of the mat, coming onto our fingertips and letting the arms dangle. Letting the weight of the upper body and the neck fold you forwards. You can grab your elbows into a rag doll. Let the neck release. You can nod the head yes and no, releasing any tension in the jaw, in the back of the neck, and in the lower back. You can rock from side to side. Feeling each hamstring open up a little bit under your own weight. No pressure, it's doing it naturally. We release our elbows, come back into our forward fold. Inhaling to look up, opening the heart in our forward fold, trying to find our shoulders on the back, almost a little bit of a back bend, like a cow pose. And we exhale as we reach our hands down for the mat. Again, looking up, opening the heart in our halfway forward fold. Lengthening the spine and exhaling to bow. Putting a slight bend in the knees as we hinge from the hips and rise up tall. Reach our hands overhead. Growing tall through both side bodies as our hands come to our heart. And we take a moment to find our mountain pose, finding a strong, flat back. These ribs pulling in, this tummy tight, our feet evenly balanced on the mat. Noticing the spine very straight. Finding, I like to say, we find our plank pose in our mountain pose. So we can imagine if you were in plank pose, how engaged the center of the body would be, and engage that here in our mountain pose. And then we will find our plank pose. Folding forwards, looking up, and we'll bow. Finding your way to plank, stepping, hopping, or jumping back. And taking a moment in plank to find that flat back. Find those hands pulling towards the feet and feet pulling towards the hands. And notice how you can use all four limbs to lengthen the spine. Lifting through the top of your head, trying to find that flat back. Feeling out the mid-back, using the core to pull those ribs in. Feeling how engaged you are through the center of your body. Imagining this is a mountain pose. We always find our mountain pose in our plank pose. Holding here for another few breaths, just to remember how this feels in this plank. And then we'll lower down slowly, coming down to our bellies. Our hands can come to our sides. We can take a little locust pose as we lift our ribs off the mat. Maybe lifting the heels and the feet too, bringing those hands beneath the shoulders. Lifted a few inches and bringing the hands down for Savasana B, our cobra pose. So in our cobra pose, we want to keep those elbows like within an inch of the side body, and we're really pulling that heart forwards, trying to lengthen the spine. We can tuck our toes behind us, bend our knees, finding a child's pose. in between the back bend and the downward facing dog. So in our down dog, we're lifting that tailbone, bowing the heart towards the toes, maybe looking up towards your knees or towards your belly button, trying to find a little bit more curve in the back. After our 5th breath, you can take some baby steps, walking forwards, finding your way to your fingertips at the top of your mat. Bending the elbows and grabbing them, releasing the neck, releasing the jaw, releasing the back of the neck as you swing your forearms parallel to the outside of the left foot. And swing the forearms parallel to the outside of that right foot. Coming back to center, exhaling, releasing the elbows. We can inhale to look up. And exhale to bow. Exhaling all the stale air out of your lungs. And then a deep inhalation as we rise up, hinging from the hips, reaching tall, growing as tall as you've been all day. And bringing our hands to our heart. Finding our mountain. Finding our strong, engaged mountain pose. Noticing the mid-body holding you long, lengthening the whole spine with your core, lifting up from the top of your head, stacking every vertebrae on your back like a pile of stones, finding yourself evenly balanced on your feet. We're going to find our weight onto this right foot and bring our left knee into standing balance, testing our balance, finding where that works for you today. Maybe lifting that heel as high as the hips, if you can, if that's comfortable. And we're going to step back into a low lunge, moving as slowly as possible, bringing those toes down to the mat. And then that left knee comes down to the mat. I like to keep the feet about hip distance apart. Bring our hands to our hips and pull this left hip forwards and up and push that right hip down so that they're even with one another. Our hands can come to our shoulders and pull them onto the back, pull them down towards the mat and reach with the middle fingers, reaching for the mat at our side, looking up. Pulling those feet together. We're going to exhale and come down to frame that front foot. Lifting that left knee off of the mat, stepping that right foot back, finding our plank, taking a moment, a very strong plank, finding the form, and here we're going to bring our knees and our chest and chin to the mat, keeping the tailbone lifted, finding a little bit of a back bend in that lower back, and wagging our tail for Ashtangasana. Feeling the lower back release any tension that may have been held there, and then pressing into our hand as we pull the heart forward into our cobra. Our cobra, we slide the chin behind the ears, keeping those elbows bent a little bit as we find the back bend, pulling the heart forward, lengthening the spine, tucking the toes behind our back, and pushing back into our downward facing dog. Pedaling out those feet. Pulling the hands towards the feet, trying to get as much as half of your weight onto your feet as you have on your hands. We're going to lift our left foot behind us and step that foot forwards into our low lunge. Bring our hands to our hips, Anjaneyasana pose. The left hip you push down and pull it back a little bit. The right hip you pull up and pull it forwards a little bit. Try to bring them in even alignment with one another so that together they're parallel to the mat. Bring the shoulder blades onto the back muscles, feeling strong as we pull our feet together and using the muscles on the outsides of the shoulders to reach those arms growing long as we're lifting up through the top of the head. Feeling strong from our foundation through the fingertips and toes. And keeping the core engaged while we bow forwards to frame that left foot, lifting that right knee off of the mat. And we can find a standing split, lifting that right foot off of the mat, bowing over the left hamstring as you lift that right heel as high as feels comfortable for you. Testing your balance wherever your practice meets you. You can bring that knee into your chest. And then maybe find a standing balance. Maybe tapping the ground between as needed. Finishing our classical sun salutation where we began. Our feet come to the mat. So take a moment, let our arms dangle, and shake it out. We'll find a window. Give yourself a little pat on the back. We're going to let the arms come to a dangle. Hands at our heart. Keeping a flat back, hinging from the hips. We're going to bow into an L, trying to keep that back as flat as possible. Noticing the hamstrings loosen and release as we bring the tailbone behind us and lift that tailbone. And then exhale and bow. Bring our hands to the mat. To our shins, finding our forward fold, finding the height that our shoulders will naturally bow to, and keeping our shoulders at about that height. We're going to bend our knees and find our chair pose. So Guardasana. So here you can either have your hands overhead, you can squeeze them together overhead if you really like a challenge on the shoulders. You can keep your hands at your heart. If you'd like a little bit of an easier variation, but we can bounce the hips, feel those legs grow a little warm. And exhale to bow, framing the feet, stepping or hopping or jumping back, finding your way into your plank. Pulling those hands to the feet to the hands, long spine. And we lower down, taking our chaturanga, letting the heart hover about an inch above the mat for a moment. And then we let the hips drop and open into our cobra. Our cobra, we're pushing all 10 toenails down to the mat as we pull the heart forwards. Pressing our weight into those fingertips. Flipping our toes to tuck the toes. You can take a child's pose to work your way up to our downward facing dog. Pedaling at our feet. Our weight comes to our hands. We look at our belly button. Lifting our tailbone. We can lift that right leg behind us. Lifting it as high as it goes. Bending the knee, stacking those hips. Trying to keep the shoulders square as we stack those hips. You can look underneath your left armpit. See if you can see your toes. And exhale, we'll bring that right foot between the hands. Coming up for a warrior one. Put that back heel down onto the mat. We're pulling the outside of that left foot forward so the pinky toe side of that foot pulls in. So we're engaging that inner leg line on the left leg. Our hips grow square. The knee falls just over the heel. Our shoulders pull onto the back. Our core feels strong. We can bring our hands to our heart. As we squeeze those feet together, pulling our legs in, using our core to pull everything in and grow our hands overhead, growing tall. And exhaling to bow, framing that right foot. Feeling those hips pull square. That left hip is pulling forwards. That right hip is pulling back. And we'll step that right foot back to meet the left. Taking your way to your downward facing dog, however you get there. Pedaling on our feet in our down dog. Pushing those through those fingertips as we lift the left foot overhead, pushing up to that heel. Bringing the left foot between the thumbs, finding Guardasana 1 on this side, that knee just above the heel, and keeping those hips squared as you pull in with that back foot, really engaging that right leg, pulling it forwards, using our core to lift everything up, and growing your arms overhead, keeping those shoulder blades on the back, pulling towards the hips, so that our back muscles are growing strong, and our ribs are being pulled in. We can exhale as we come down to frame that front foot. Pushing our weight onto the hands, lifting that left foot, and stepping it back, finding our plank, meeting me in the downward facing dog. You can always skip the chaturangas. Depending on where your practice is, you do what works for you. Pedaling on our feet and walking those feet forwards to the top of the mat. We can exhale to bow. Inhale to look up, curving the back, opening the heart. Finding the height of the shoulders here as we bend the knees, keeping the shoulders at that same height. Finding our chair pose, Guardasana. Keeping those shoulder blades onto the back. We're going to keep our hands in prayer as we bounce those hips. The right hand can come to the right thigh. The left elbow crosses over, finding a prayer twist as you look up and try to bring your heart to the center of your hands. Don't bring your hands to your heart. Bring your heart to your hands. And don't let that left side body collapse. You keep the left side body long as you lift up. Using your core to pull those ribs in. And exhaling as we unhook. And come back to center. Bouncing those hips. Taking a forward fold between if we need to. Finding our chair. Hands at our heart. Bouncing our hips. Left hand comes to the left thigh. That right elbow crosses over so that that back of that tricep is just between the knee and the hip, ideally. But find it where you find it. Find your hands in prayer. And then lift your heart towards the center of those hands. Lengthening that right side body. And looking to the ceiling. Taking some full breaths here. Always remember to breathe. Exhaling to release, unhooking that elbow. Finding our hands at our heart. And exhaling to bow. You can inhale to look up. Exhale to bow. And inhale to rise tall. Growing our hands overhead. Bringing them to our heart. Finding our weight onto that right foot. Finding our balance stable. We'll bend the left knee into our chest. Finding standing balance. Testing our stability. We can exhale as we push that foot out in front of us, lifting it as high as we can, trying to straighten that hamstring. As straight as it goes, straight is a relative term. Bringing our hands back to our heart, finding our standing balance, and then slowly as possible, we step that left foot back, finding Anjaneyasana, the low lunge. The toes come to the mat, that left knee comes down to the mat. Those hips come about a hip distance apart. Pull our hips into alignment. We're going to find our eagle arms, that right arm underneath the left. Bringing our palms together, lifting our elbows to shoulder height, pulling those shoulders down the back, tucking those left toes behind us, and lifting that back knee up, finding high lunge with eagle arms. Keeping our core strong over here, breathing all the way down to that left leg. Exhaling as we tap that left knee back down to the mat. Unbinding our arms, bringing our hands down to frame that front foot. Walking our hands back, taking a Ardha Hanumanasana, a half splits, just opening up that hamstring a little bit more, pointing the toe. Our hands can walk forwards to frame that right foot, tucking the left toe behind us, lifting that left knee, and then stepping that right knee back. Finding our plank, finding our strong plank. Keeping our stability here, pulling those feet towards the hands, hands towards the feet. Find the height of the tailbone and keep the tailbone at about the height that it's at. As you bend those knees, bring those knees to the mat. And then bring your heart, your chest, your chin, finding Ashtangasana, the inchworm pose. Finding that curve in the lower back. Wagging your tail left and right, loosening up that lower back. Finding the weight onto the hands and pulling the heart through into our cobra or our up dog. Rolling over the toes, finding downward facing dog. Pedaling out those feet. Squeezing those hands together for our stability. Reaching our right foot behind us. And stepping that right foot forwards between the hands. That back knee comes down to the mat. Hands come to our hips. Finding our low lunge on this side. Shoulders onto the back. And this time it's the left hand underneath the opposite side. Squeezing those hands together, lifting those elbows to shoulder height. Tucking those left toes behind you. And you can stay here if you like, or you can lift up into our high lunge. Finding those feet, pulling them together. Don't let them, they seem to naturally want to push apart, but keep the engagement as you pull everything inwards. Squeezing those hands together, squeezing those feet together, squeezing the core together. Exhaling as we bend that left knee down to the mat. Unbinding the hands, bringing them down to frame that right foot, lifting that left knee, finding our standing split. As you lift that left foot off of the mat, keep it as straight as you can and lift the heel as high as you can. Finding your way to our standing balance. If you need to tap the ground in between with your toe, that is okay. Finding your balance. Exhaling as we kick that left foot out in front of us, getting that hamstring as straight as it likes to go. Hands come to our heart. Bring our feet back together, finding our stability. You can step on the toenails to loosen up anything from that foot. We can bring our hands behind our back and bind the shoulders, loosening up the outsides of those arms, opening the heart, pulling those shoulder blades down. As you open the heart towards the ceiling, looking up. And take full breaths, fully exhaling. All the stale air comes out of your lungs. And you inhale back to center. Hands to our heart. Finding your stability with your feet about palm distance between the feet. As we bow, we're going to bend our knees, keeping our shoulders at this height for our chair pose. Our hands come to our heart, bouncing our hips. Let's try a one-legged chair. If you can find your weight onto that right foot and lift that left knee up and off the ground. Standing balance, but with bent legs. Both legs are bent. Exhaling to set that left foot back down, bouncing our hips, finding your stability, lifting that right foot up and off the mat, keeping both legs bent. And stepping that right foot back down, bouncing those hips. Utkatasana, reaching our hands overhead. And we bow, coming to our forward fold, straightening those knees. Our hands come down to the mat. We can step back into our plank, bring our knees to the mat, finding a tabletop here. So in our tabletop, we're going to work on balancing our arms and our legs in a bird dog. So reaching that right hand overhead, that left foot behind us, pushing out through the left heel, pointing those left toes towards your heart, pointing those right fingers all the way in front of you. And bring that right hand out to the right. Bring that left foot out to the left. Try to keep them parallel to one another. And as you use your core to bring the left hand, pulling the fingertips towards those right toes. Finding some stability in this simple yet challenging posture. And noticing your breathing, notice where your breath energy is going. Bringing that left foot back out behind us, and that right hand back out in front of us. We're going to exhale as we bring the elbow to the knee, tucking that left knee into the left side body. And that right elbow comes to tap the knee, trying to lift the leg and elbow as much as you can, using that left arm to do so. Exhaling the left foot behind us, that right hand comes overhead. Find a deep stretch as you expand long and bring our hands together and our feet and knees together. Taking a moment and a cat, a cow, to loosen it up and clear it out in between sides. Finding our tabletop, finding stability on the right hand, the weight behind the fingertips and the knuckles, and the left toes and the left knee. You lift the right foot behind you, pushing out through that heel, lengthening, lifting that left hand overhead, and lengthening. Pulling that right hand towards those left toes, pulling those left toes towards your heart. Bring that left hand all the way out to the left. And that right foot comes all the way out to the right. Trying to lift that heel as high as the hips. Pushing out through that heel, pointing those toes at your face. Squeezing that left hand towards your right leg. Finding your stability, building our warmth. Breathing into the pose. Trying to be as stable, as little motion as possible. Then we bring that right foot back out behind us, and that left hand all the way overhead. Bending the elbow, bending the knee, finding our crunch as that right knee comes into the chest. That left elbow comes to tap it. You try to get as much height, keeping that heel tucked all the way into the glute. Exhaling to release, that left hand comes overhead, that right foot comes behind you. Try to expand a little bit more than you have yet. Growing long. And exhaling our hands to the mat, our feet and knees to the mat. Keeping the heels wide as we bow into our child's pose. Bring those fingers all the way out in front of us. Tucking our toes behind us. And lifting up into our downward facing dog. Finding your stability in this pose. Here we can lift that left foot behind us. Tuck that knee into the chin, that heel into the glute. See how much height you can get between that leg and the mat. And then step that left foot between the thumbs. That right knee comes down to the mat. Our hips come square, starting in our low lunge. Arms come long. That right hand underneath, finding eagle arms. Lifting that right leg, finding our high lunge. Keeping those eagle arms. And stepping that right foot forwards into a chair. Noticing how that front leg does not change between our warrior one and our chair. Finding your chair. Finding your stability here. Finding your weight onto that right foot. The left knee finds our one-legged chair. Unwinding the hands into prayer. And see if you can tap that right elbow to that left knee. Inhaling back to center. And stepping our left foot back into a high lunge on this side. Bring that knee down to the mat. Finding our stability, refinding the posture. Our hips and shoulders in alignment. And this time, the left arm underneath the right. Finding eagle arms. Finding our stability with our weight on that front foot. Tucking those left toes behind you. And lifting up into our high lunge. Keeping that right knee exactly where it is. That right leg holds steady as you step that left foot forwards, finding our chair. Balancing those hips, lifting those elbows, releasing the hands into prayer, lifting the right leg, and tapping the left elbow to the right knee for a one-legged chair twist. Unhooking the elbow, feet come back down to center. You can reach up and bow, straightening the knees. Find our forward fold. Exhale and release. Inhale to look up. And exhale to bow. Hinging from the hips, we grow tall and rise. Their hands at our heart. Finding our breathing, regaining our strength, finding our balance. We can balance on that right foot as we bring that left knee into a standing balance. The left hand can come to the ankle and place the heel to the inside of the thigh. You can always go either above or below the knee for our tree pose, Vrikshasana. When you find your balance here, you can place that left hand on the inner left thigh closer to the knee and try to open it out behind you so you're pushing it back so that your whole body tries to come into one plane of alignment. Finding your stability, growing your branches, opening that hip. Tree pose is a hip opener. Exhaling our hands to our heart. Finding standing balance and stepping our feet back together. You can step onto those toes, release any last tension from that foot. Before we try the other side, Vrikshasana. Lifting through the top of the head, Balancing the spine like a pile of stones. Lifting that right knee into our standing balance. Noticing the little fluctuations in the mind. Do not become them. Become still. The right hand comes to the right ankle. You place that right heel either above or below the knee onto the inner left leg. Finding your stability wherever it is. It helps to find a solid drishti, a focus point on the wall, to steadily set your gaze. Once there, you keep opening that hip, pushing that heel into the inner leg. That seems to help the balance. And you can reach your hands overhead, growing your branches. Finding stability as long as it lasts and embracing it for every moment that it's there, even if it's only a moment. Finding our standing balance and standing our feet into our mountain pose. Finding our stability in a moment of gratitude for 2 good feet. It's great to have 2 feet. We're going to bow forwards, finding the height of our shoulders for our chair pose. Bringing our hands to our heart. Our last set of chair poses, I promise. Putting our weight onto that right leg as you lift that left knee into your chest and cross it over, finding eagle legs. You can grow our arms out long, cross that right arm underneath the left, finding our eagle arms, and try Guardasana, the eagle pose. Trying to keep that hip as low as it would be in chair pose. Only finding what works for you. For a moment, and unwinding, releasing the hands, and growing tall. It's one of those poses that feels like you're tying the body into knots so that the knots in the mind can come undone. We bow into our forward fold, finding our chair pose, hands at our heart, lifting that right knee, opposite leg, and crossing it over, finding eagle legs, staying here, if this is all that you can balance, or finding our eagle arms, if you would like to put that left arm underneath the right, lifting those elbows to shoulder height, squeezing those hands together, and bowing into that hip. So we're really working that thigh, finding our balance, finding Guardasana, holding even for just a moment, and then unwinding the feet, unwinding the hands, and exhaling to release. Our hands come down to the mat. We can step, hop, or float, finding your way into your child's pose. The knees come down to the mat. Our hands reach overhead. Breathing all the way down into the lower back body. We can bring our hands behind us and bind those fingers behind the back, opening the heart, opening the shoulders. Releasing any tension in those shoulders and in the upper back as you swing from side to side. Breathing all the way into the shoulders and releasing those hands to the mat. Stepping it through into a seated posture. Finding our butterfly. Now that our hips have become open, we can place the outsides of the feet together, trying to bring all 10 toenails down to the mat, lifting up through the top of the head, and keeping a flat back as we bow. Inhaling to grow tall, lifting up. This time we hook our toes with our fingers and our thumb, and we can curve the back like a cat. You try to bring your nose between your feet. Finding a little bit more length in that upper back as you curve. Exhaling as we release. Hands come to the outsides of the legs. We squeeze them together, finding our way onto our backs into a happy baby pose as we grab the outsides of the feet, rocking from side to side. Giving the back a little massage, trying to keep that tailbone rooted as you open the hips with the left hand and the right. You can bring our knees together and bring the knees over to that right, finding a supine twist. The shoulders stay rooted onto the mat. Breathing into the spine. And our knees come to our heart. Give yourself a hug. Rock from side to side. And cross those legs over to the left. Taking a full, deep inhalation all the way down the spine. Keeping that right shoulder all the way on the mat. And releasing any muscles and tensions in the legs. Our knees come back to center. You can pick any last poses before your Shavasana. I always like to find the hide the ears pose with the forward fold where your knees come to your ears. And then vertebrae by vertebrae, you release to the mat into your Shavasana as you lay and find stability and balance in this simple supine posture. Taking this moment to be in touch with your breathing, with gratitude for every breath of air that is a gift to be alive. Gratitude for the ability to move the body in these postures. Gratitude for the stillness of the mind that comes to surface after practice. Noticing body, how it feels to have a body, how it feels to be still, to be present, feeling the energy flowing through, coming in from your breath, flowing to the heart, filling your blood with oxygen, nutrients, and everything that you need. Feeling those nutrients and that love and awareness and light flowing into every muscle and tendon we have worked today in all corners of the body. Feeling yourself still, feeling yourself light, knowing that this sense of peace that we've created here today is yours. You can take it with you. It's always there for you, no matter what's going on in the world, no matter where you are in life. You can always tap into this beautiful sense of peace that lies within us. We can bring that intention into our bodies as we begin to wiggle the fingers and the toes, bending your knees into your chest, and rolling onto that right side body, using the arm as a pillow. Laying here, renewed and reborn, refreshed and free. And pushing yourself up into a seated posture with your hands at your heart and your eyes closed. I'm so grateful to all of you taking this time to join us in this virtual practice of yoga today. The love and light in me honors that love and light in all of you. Namaste.